Hello, my name is Yi-Yang Chen. This is a pre-recorded presentation for the 2021 meeting of the Society for Mathematical Psychology. My title is A Hierarchical Bayesian Model of the Continuous Performance Task. This work is done in collaboration with Drs. Nicholas Bradford, Mario Perugia, and Trisha Vincent. In this study, we model the continuous performance task, which is often used to measure attention and vigilance. In this task, researchers usually present a sequence or multiple sequences of stimuli, which are presented simultaneously one at a time with a fixed time interval. The participants are asked to keep attention to these sequences and identify targets within the sequences and respond only to the targets. We pay particular attention to the identical pairs version of the continuous performance task, which is adopted in the matrix cognitive battery to assess attentional deficits within people with psychological disorders. In this version, there are 3 sequences of stimuli containing 2-digit, 3-digit, and 4-digit stimuli respectively. This figure shows an example of a sequence from the 4-digit stimuli. In this version, the target is defined as a stimulus that is exactly identical to the stimulus immediately preceding it. In this figure, it is colored in red. Apart from the target, which the participants have to respond to, this version also contains 2 categories of competitors that are somewhat similar to the target but are non-targets. They're both colored in blue in this figure. The first one is run-order competitors. It contains exactly the same digits with its immediately preceding stimulus, but in a wrong order. The second one are the wrong-digit competitors. It contains the same digits with the right order, except for 1. Apart from these 3 types, all the other stimulus are non-competitors, which are not in any of these categories. We model this task with a hierarchical Bayesian structure. We use a race model that consists of a go process and a stop process. In the go process, the participants determine that the stimulus are identical and make a response. For the go process, the participants can only identify these stimulus as identical when they are identical in all aspects. Therefore, we model it with a Wiener process with a drift, where the participants keep collecting information of the similarities of these stimuli until it reaches a sufficient amount that allows them to determine them as identical. We model this amount with a decision threshold. For the stop process, the participants only need to find one difference to know that the stimuli are different and non-target. Therefore, we model it with a Poisson process where the participant identify differences between stimuli at random time points. This figure shows the Wiener process for the go process and the Poisson process for the stop process. In this task, we consider that the participants are able to identify the stimuli as a non-target and seize response when they find the first difference between stimuli, which is shown by the first arrival time of the Poisson process. When the first arrival time occurs before the Wiener process reaches the decision threshold, the participant would determine the stimuli as a non-target and seize response. If the first arrival time occurs after the winner process reaches the decision threshold, the participant would identify the stimuli as identical and respond to it. We used a hierarchical Bayesian model that are able to model multiple groups where each group consists of multiple participants. For participant I in group C and item N in the sequence, we consider the influence of multiple covariates, the different parameters of the race, including stimuli type and stimuli length. For the stimuli type, we use X1, X2, X4, and X3 to characterize whether a stimuli is in the category of a target, a wrong-digit competitor, a wrong-order competitor, and non-competitor. For the stimuli length, we use Y1 and Y2 to characterize whether a stimuli have 3 or 4 digits. In the model parameters for the drift rate of the go process, V, which is the speed of accumulating similarity information between stimuli, we consider it to be affected by the type of stimuli because different types of stimuli consists of different amount of similarities, where the targets have the most amount of similarity and non-competitors have the least amount of similarity. For the decision threshold B of the go process, which is the amount of information needed for a participant to identify the stimuli as identical, we consider it to be affected by only the stimuli length because it is unlikely to change the decision threshold within the same sequence. Rate lambda, which characterizes the frequency of finding differences in the stop process, we consider that it is affected by both the type of stimulus and the stimuli length. The structure we present here is best fitted to our empirical data set with regard to model comparison criteria such as DIC. With a response R, response time T, and a non-decision time tau, and the winner process ensures that the time needed for the go process follows an inverse Gaussian distribution, and the Poisson process ensures that the time needed for the first arrival time follows an exponential distribution. Therefore, we have closed forms for the go process distribution and the probability to cease response with the stop process. This figure shows the full diagram of the hierarchical Bayesian model. We then fit the model to a dataset which is used to measure the attentional deficits in people with first episode psychosis. We have 34 patients in this dataset and 30 controls without first episode psychosis. In pre-analysis of this dataset, people with first episode psychosis have lower accuracy in their response in the continuous performance task and also mildly slower RTs. We fit the model to this dataset with STAN implemented in R. This figure shows the results from the estimated posterior distributions for a selected number of parameters. The orange box plots are for the priors. The blue box plots are from people with first episode psychosis, and the gray box plots are for people without first episode psychosis. By inspection of these plots, the parameters that show the largest between group differences are in the stop process rate lambda. This figure shows the two parameters that has the largest between group differences. The first parameter on the left are the stop process when the stimulus is a target. And when the stimulus is a target, the estimated posterior probability that patients have a higher stop process rate is 0.946. It indicates that when the stimulus is a target, which means that they are identical, the patients are more likely to determine that there are differences and cease response. The second on the right is for the stop process rate for the non-competitors that have the largest amount of difference. The estimated posterior probability that patients have a higher stop process rate is 0.073. It indicates that when there are the most amount of differences, the patients are more likely to determine the stimuli as identical and make a response compared to with healthy controls. In conclusion, the performance differences of people with and without first episode psychosis in the continuous performance task mainly results from the stop process to identify differences or a mismatch between stimuli. And the people with first episode psychosis might have more difficulty identifying the mismatches between stimuli and utilizing this information to guide their behaviors compared with healthy controls. That's all. Thank you.